In this video, I want to show you how you can design your minimal API endpoints to accept complex types, not just primitive types. If you want to improve your code to avoid primitive obsession, then you can push that to the very boundary, to the endpoint itself. Let me show you how that works on a typical minimal API endpoint. This endpoint is querying for a single company data by receiving a string handle that uniquely identifies the company. This particular endpoint would work the same whether you sent an invalid handle or a handle that simply does not exist in the database. But look at another endpoint which posts the new company data. That string is hidden inside of this DTO, and it is still a string. And so what the implementation must do is to validate the handle first before using it. On the other hand, look at this. This endpoint is receiving a string handle for the company, but a GUID ID for the address. It is deleting a single address from a company. Well, GUID is not entirely a primitive type, even though it is simple. It still has some structure. It passes validation. I want my handles to operate at least as GUIDs do. What would happen if I accepted a string here as well? Here, I would need to parse that string into a GUID and to report an error in case that parsing failed. And here comes the revelation. ASP.NET Core will transform a string into any type provided that that type has a public TryParse method similar to the one GUID has. Apparently, all you need to do when you introduce your own type that you want to accept through an endpoint is to also supply a TryParse method for it. Let's see how that works on handles. This is the company domain model for which that handle will work. It is exposing the string handle, and all the problems begin here. This company domain model has a primitive obsession, which I want to cure, because it has all the symptoms of primitive obsession, like having to validate the string on every step. The handle must match some regular expression. That's not relevant. There is some validation. But the question is, why is that validation in the company model? The answer is simple. I had no other place to put it. Hence, the primitive obsession observed on this domain model. Therefore, I want a handle to be a type, a proper type, like any other. And I want that type to manage its own validity. Here is the company handle type. The record means we have equality implemented. That's very important for types like this. This type is as lightweight as a string, but it is much more powerful because now we have the help of the compiler to check whether we have assigned a valid object or not. String accepts anything, but the handle will not. And then comes the support for ASP.NET Core. I will expose a static TryParse method which will try to parse the string input into a company handle object. Let me extract validation into a helper static method so that I can also validate the property on initialization. A caller can still evade this validation if it uses the default keyword. If you want to prevent that, make this a record class. If you want to retain its high performance in sense that it avoids additional allocation, then keep it the struct, but check for default on assignments. It is very similar to how we would handle null. You will see I will not let the default of this struct enter any company object, and the validation will be complete. But first, how will this affect the endpoint? Instead of accepting a string, I will accept a handle object directly, and ASP.NET Core will parse the input string using my custom TryParse method. And I want to show you the integration test that invokes this delete address endpoint. The test has passed. That proves that the endpoint has indeed received my object of type company handle instead of a simple string. And that is pretty much all. However, there will be more nuances here, which you can see in other endpoints. Post-async endpoint is receiving the entire DTO, which now, here it is, which will now contain the company handle instead of a plain string. The trouble is that this won't work unless we specify a custom JSON deserializer for this new type. I will first patch the endpoint. Everything should be working as before, but as I said, the deserialization is broken, so it won't work unless I provide a class like this one. When you define a custom type for input and output, you also need to provide a custom converter like this one. The read method will parse the string into the company handle, and the write will convert it into a string. Simple wrappers like company handle will have simple converter classes, yet you need to add them to the project, and you must register this converter. Here in the program.cs, I will add the converter into the JSON serialization options. Serializer will now use it whenever it encounters the company handle type. I will now show you how you can integrate the strongly typed objects into the domain model so that now the entire application becomes better designed. But before that, let me steal a moment of your time to remind you that this channel and everything on this channel is free, thanks to the patrons. If you like what you have learned from this video and all other videos on my channel, then please consider joining the growing community of patrons on my Patreon page. As a patron, you will have access to the source code from this video and from all other videos on this channel. Thank you very much. Now let's complete this demonstration. Let me show you the integration tests that are creating a company in all kinds of ways, valid or invalid. There are 15 test cases and all 15 are passing, so yes, definitely my endpoints are working with the strongly typed company handle, not with a string anymore. By the way, the same way how you integrate a strong type into a minimal API, you do with controllers, because it's ASP.NET Core underneath. Both serialization, deserialization, and parsing from and to strings is working exactly the same. Beyond this, it is classical programming. Put the strong type into the model and follow the traces of red on your screen. The compiler will tell you wherever you mismatched the type on assignment. That is the core reason why we substitute strings with more complex types, to have the assignment checks. And there is no reason to check the handle's content here, but because I chose to use the record struct to improve performance, this is the place where I would reject defaults. So technically, you could create an invalid handle object by using the default keyword, but you won't be able to put it into a company model. Therefore, you won't be able to make a damage. If you don't like it, just use record class and sustain one additional memory allocation on every handle instance. Finally, the validation doesn't belong in the company model. It never did. I will delete this method. This is the final code. I have simply fixed all the compile time errors and all my integration tests are passing, because when you add types in place of primitive types, then the compiler is doing its job. It's telling you all incorrect assignments, you just fix those and your application will work. But now you know how to integrate those higher types into the minimal API natively. I hope you will find this useful in your everyday work.